On January 13th, investigators are not chasing suspects or moving units. They are examining old case files, bank information, transport logs, and paperwork while seated in secure rooms. At first glance, a pattern that shouldn't be there appears to be harmless. 8 charity groups, each claiming to offer humanitarian relief, handle $6.20 $2 million over 20 months, with transfers ranging from $40,000 to $120,000, coming in every 10 to 14 days. Like regular bills, they are steady and predictable and never cause any alarm. However, the issue is revealed when investigators slow it down and align it. 90% of that money is gone in 48 hours. It is aid for 3,000 people on paper. In reality, there are no staff payments, no food purchases, no medical supplies, and no proof anyone was helped. The paperwork then becomes more bizarre. Almost empty shipments that are labeled as educational supplies arrive. Names are never mentioned in messages. Only age and units were confirmed. They are scheduling, pricing, and counting people. The numbers are precise. Adults range from $12,000 to $18,000, while minors range from $22,000 to $38,000. All of this suggests a single offshore transfer point. Now, more than 60 federal personnel are preparing for a coordinated operation designed to secure people, evidence, and a system that may have been moving human lives for years. What is the current number of victims within this network? How many were moved before anyone questioned the paperwork? If you want investigations like these, subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments what year you were born and whether you believe that crimes like this may truly go unnoticed. Agents are already studying financial records and historical case files, while seated in secure rooms as the probe gets begin on January 13, attempting to comprehend how a humanitarian effort turned into a crime without being halted sooner, because that is when the pattern first emerges. Investigators go back 16 months as they go through the documentation, when a routine transaction report shows money moving in a way that looks normal on the surface, but wrong once you slow it down and line it up. 8 charitable groups, each claiming to assist disadvantaged individuals with remittances ranging from $40,000 to $120,000, arriving every 10 to 14 days. Handled $6.2 million over the course of 20 months. Steady like everyday home expenses that are unquestioned. When investigators discovered that 90% of the funds were either withdrawn or diverted within 48 hours, it becomes evident that the money was never intended to remain or to reach the individuals named in the reports. Those reports claimed aid for 3,000 people in East Africa. However, there were no field invoices to demonstrate that actual labor was completed, no meal orders, no medical supplies, no staff compensation, and no transportation expenses. 2 names kept coming up, and although the paperwork indicated East Africa, the money itself ended up in Dubai, Miami, and London. Leela Rahman is in charge of the accounts and approves logistics contracts, while Adil Rahman signs formal letters and endorsements. So consider this. How can millions of dollars intended to save lives go in such a way without assisting anyone? How long before people are harmed by such a system? Who paid the price prior to January 13th, when the financial picture was presented? If these questions are just now being asked, naturally, focus shifts to the actual movement of that money, because money that flows this precisely is never idle. Motion, timing, and control always pay off. Investigators start by extracting transport data from cargo containers, followed by lease ships and private charter aircraft. Financial transfers are followed days later by planned movements that follow the same rhythm, creating a pattern that is difficult to ignore once those records are arranged sequentially. Labels that sound reasonable and pass standard. Inspections are used to declare the container as educational equipment and emergency migration support. But deeper audits tell a different story because many containers arrive partially empty and others carry goods worth 70 to 80% less than what was declared, making it clear that the paperwork exists to distract, not to describe reality. The tone shifts once more as conversations are analyzed. No one uses names, no gender is stated, and no destination is specified clearly in encrypted emails or internal communications. Just terms like units, cleared inventory, and verified age. This language is typically used for warehouse inventory rather than actual individuals, reducing people to things that are able to be authorized, sorted, and tallied. Pricing is revealed when payments are compared to those messages. Rates range from $12,000 to $18,000 for adults and from $22,000 to $38,000 for youngsters. There are also additional fees for sealed transport, fake paperwork, and medical maintenance. It all comes together around a luxury yacht that serves as a floating storehouse and sorting station, never docks in U.S. waters, stays outside U.S. territorial waters, and meets smaller vessels at night. Since this is neither paperwork fraud nor migration support, the reality at this point cannot be avoided. It is an organized human trafficking system designed to transport people as inventory while remaining undetected. What would you name it? And how many went through before anyone began counting persons instead of paperwork? Investigators realize that waiting longer will simply result in more lives going through the system once it is evident that people are being numbered, priced, and transferred as goods. Since stopping a single cargo is not the only objective, a decision is made to take action, but not in a way that would alert the larger network. Its purpose is to apprehend individuals, obtain evidence, and conceal the remainder of the operation until it is too late. The operation must take place before daylight, therefore timing is crucial. Low marine activity creates a tight window where surprise is conceivable and escape routes are sparse. Because sight is poor and regular movements blend into the darkness, the FBI, the DEA, Homeland Security Investigations, and the U.S. Coast Guard are among the more than 60 employees assigned. As long as the sky stays dark and the water keeps calm, they are separated into 4 teams, each with distinct tasks that overlap just enough to prevent any gaps. The open ocean is transformed into a controlled area where every movement can be monitored around 4:11 a.m., when the outer border is silently walled off, cutting off approach and exit routes without lights or sirens. 3 minutes later, at 4:14 a.m., 2 swift boats approach, traveling the distance in less than 90 seconds. As they approach a luxurious yacht that is situated just outside of territorial seas, their engines are running at low throttle. A ship that has never had to dock in the United States, since the layout has been researched for months, and every second counts once the first door is breached. Teams break up right once, with one heading to the main deck, one diving into the technical rooms, and one pressing for the lower compartments. A Dill man is shown standing by himself on the upper deck, clutching a satellite phone and speaking in brief, controlled sentences, the type of speech one uses when one feels that jurisdiction and distance still shield them until the line falls dead. Layla Rahman is seen sitting in front of an encrypted interface and actively accessing protected systems in a sealed compartment below that is lined with servers and equipment racks. Coded entries that corresponded 2 months' worth of financial and transportation data already in evidence filled her screen, and within 4 minutes, both are restrained, separated, and removed from operational control. The goal was never only the people on board. So even though the yacht is safe, the operation is not finished. Teams find evidence of intentional alteration intended to conceal what follows as they proceed deeper inside the ship, including walls that don't belong there, tight hallways where there should be wide space, and electronic locks where none are indicated on the original designs. The temperature is higher than anticipated, and the air is stale and thick in the lengthy compartment behind the first reinforced door. There are 156 individuals inside, packed on platforms, crammed into a small area, sedated, unrecorded, and identified by numbers rather than names. The total number of people confined in an area too low to stand is increased to 200 when a second concealed portion, accessible only with the use of cutting tools, is found behind a false floor panel. Ages range from 6 to 17. There are no documents, no identifying records, and no personal belongings, only tags, medical tubing, and handwritten codes that correspond to transport schedules and payment logs already traced through financial systems. There is only the scent of recycled air, the heat trapped below deck, and the silence that results when sedatives wear off and bewilderment takes the place of sleep. No spectacular movement, no screaming, as reported. Medical teams begin extraction and triage as Coast Guard vessels move alongside, and each person brought up is counted slowly and deliberately, because this is the first time they have been counted as people instead of inventory. Evidence including encrypted gadgets, transaction ledgers, and routing lists that demonstrate years of activity across several nations, fills storage boxes and sealed containers within the yacht, all of which point to a system built to function silently and continually. The ship that served as a floating warehouse and sorting station is completely under control by the time the sun comes up. Its goal was revealed by numbers, space, and structure rather than by sentiment or witness. One question also looms over the operation when the final individual is taken onto the deck. Because how many people passed through this system before anyone ever looked behind the walls? If 200 were discovered here in a single night, and how many were never ever counted? The operation doesn't slow down now that the yacht is secured, and the people on board can finally be seen as human. Because what was discovered at sea validates what investigators had always feared, namely, that the ship was a gate rather than the destination, and that other people were already waiting on land. 3 coordinated raids start in a matter of hours. It will take some time before word of the offshore operation gets out. A warehouse close to a significant port is the initial target, a location that appears normal from the outside, with shipping, traffic, and noise that obscures everything, where agents break through the doors to discover rows of makeshift mattresses, commercial kitchenware, and medical supplies set up for temporary storage rather than long-term care. A suburban home in a peaceful area serves as the second location. Neighbors said that until teams moved in and discovered rooms converted for sleeping, with interior locks and timetables posted that controlled movement and silence, they thought the big property, which had trimmed lawns and no outward signs of activity, was a group home or student accommodation. The third location is listed as an educational establishment and has enrollment papers and brochures claiming to offer cultural support and language instruction. Yet inside there are no classrooms, no lesson plans, and no teachers. Holding areas and input logs should only correspond to dates that are already associated with transport movements from the boat. 97 more persons are recovered in all three locations. Like at sea, they are meticulously counted. Due to the fact that many are confused, lack documentation, and are unable to provide an explanation for their origin or intended destination. Recovered schedules demonstrate deliberate distribution, classifying individuals into demand-driven groups such as domestic work, forced labor placements, and unlawful adoption agreements. Each was given a schedule and a final destination. Each is seen as an unfinished transaction. Evidence starts to appear everywhere as teams secure the locations. Stacks of fake identity documents such as birth certificates and residency cards that are not part of any legitimate system are discovered next to forgery kits. By connecting identities on land to movements at sea, printed lists of receivers, middlemen, and payment confirmations combine disparate sites into a single uninterrupted chain. There is little question that this was a well-run business based on demand and profit thanks to the recovery of detailed pricing sheets that specify base charges as well as additional fees for document quality, age category, and compliance level. By the end of the day, the scale becomes undeniable because the offshore discovery was not an isolated shipment, and the land-based sites were not independent operations. They were interconnected parts of a single system that was intended to receive, sort, and relocate individuals after they had passed the last obstacle. And with every synchronized takedown of this magnitude, detectives are left with the same silent reality once the final place is cleared. The movement's termination merely shows how long it was permitted to continue, and how many people died before the network was eventually compelled to come out into the light. If you lived next door to this warehouse, what would you think? If this school was mentioned in your city and no one ever inquired about what was actually going on inside, or if this house was on your block, when the arrests are complete and the sites are secured, investigators finally have the time to step back and measure what they are really looking at. And since money never lies once, it has nowhere else to hide. They start by following it all the way to the finish. Financial records pulled from seized devices and bank access logs reveal $46 million spread across offshore accounts, parked in jurisdictions designed to slow oversight and protect secrecy. In addition, an additional $21 million was stored in cryptocurrency wallets that traveled across borders more quickly than any aircraft or ship could. The picture gets heavier when experts reconstruct the time frame because the network made over $80 million in revenue over the course of 8 years, not from products or services, but from transporting people through a system designed to appear legitimate at each stop. The funds were used to support intermediaries in 12 different nations, each of whom performed a particular function: recruitment, transport, document creation, holding, and distribution, creating a chain where no single person touched the entire operation and no single arrest could expose it all at once. Investigators acknowledge that hundreds of victims are still missing even after the raids. There are no names, no records, and no obvious path left by those who traveled through earlier routes, earlier ships, and earlier facilities that are no longer in existence, because the structure relied on soft power, humanitarian branding, official access, and benevolent language to cross borders that would stop any obvious criminal cold. The case now appears to be an industry rather than a crime committed by individuals. It was real logistics, dressed in a phony charity, a supply chain built not for aid, but for profit, designed to exploit trust, urgency, and silence. Thus, ask yourself this: how many such systems remain in operation because they appear to be reliable? How many cautions are disregarded since there doesn't seem to be anything wrong? And who is actually keeping an eye out to make sure people aren't the product when money, power, and legitimacy all work so well together? This is not a narrative about a single criminal network, a yacht, or money, despite what you have heard, because such specifics are only important if they enable us to recognize a greater reality that is simple to overlook when things seem safe and routine. This case demonstrates how evil rarely appears violent at first because it frequently adopts formal titles, neat clothes, courteous language, and humanitarian pledges. Additionally, the system has been in place for years while individuals have learned to avoid asking questions. By the time the harm is apparent, since actual injury does not usually start with force or weaponry, this lesson is straightforward but unsettling. Paperwork that is not thoroughly reviewed is often the first step. Good intentions that are never confirmed, and money that moves too smoothly. This also serves as a warning that thinking the world is safe does not provide protection. It results from being aware of when something seems strange, even if it appears to be lawful, reputable, and professional on the surface. This narrative has already accomplished its goal if it caused you to pause and reflect, because awareness is frequently the only thing standing between those who profit from silence and those who are at risk. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel if you would want to see more investigations like this and stories that reveal what is hidden in plain sight, because each subscription contributes to the advancement of these stories rather than their disappearance. It's more important than you might think, so allow me to ask you a personal question today. In a world like this, how does your generation view accountability, silence, and justice? What year were you born? Conversations are the means by which awareness becomes action, so please share your opinions below.